You are listening to the Objects of Affection collection. Study 51. Debord's Spectacle Meets Sholette's Missing Mass, How Artisan Activism Forges Moral Capital and Revalues Luxury. The contemporary analysis of material culture reveals a debilitating systemic condition. The structural crisis of value in markets dominated by speculative abstraction. The luxury sector, once defined by demonstrable craft and rare materials, now suffers from philosophical and economic exhaustion, driven by endemic instability in how human effort is translated into economic value. This diagnosis points directly to the foundational ethical dilemma, encapsulated by the concept of ontological insecurity. The intensive, highly skilled labor performed by the artisan fails to correspond to a stable, commensurate economic valuation. This insecurity is not merely financial. It reflects a spiritual exhaustion within a system that has fundamentally chosen to prioritize fleeting appearances over genuine lived experience and stable being, marking a historical regression from being into having, and having into merely appearing. To effectively counter this volatility and construct a metric of value immune to the rapid monetization and dissolution of financial markets, a radical synthesis of key critical theories is required. This study proposes uniting Guy Debord's monumental critique of image-mediated social life, famously detailed as the spectacle, with Gregory Sholette's political economy framework concerning the vast, unacknowledged surplus of creative labor, termed the missing mass or dark matter. The convergence of these two critiques provides the necessary intellectual architecture to redefine value. The ultimate goal is to validate artisan activism, the explicit political declaration of craft labor, as the precise mechanism for translating ethical commitment into inalienable, non-speculative worth, as demonstrated in artisan activism. The explicit protest metric. The central thesis argues that artisan activism is the required political détournement, subversion, that compels the invisible mass of surplus labor to become radically visible within the finished object. This conscious act of ethical commitment transforms the manufactured material culture into moral capital, a countercurrency that resists the spectacle's structural demand for reification, abstraction, and financial fluidity. The philosophical justification for this approach lies in recognizing that the spectacle, while presenting itself as the source of all fulfillment, perpetually promises authentic social experience, community participation, and genuine fulfillment, yet consistently delivers only deception, always compensated by the promise of a new deception through the deployment of vulgarized pseudo-festivals. This profound structural failure to deliver authenticity creates a discernible vacuum within contemporary consumption, a hunger for narrative depth, tangible connection and permanence that the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework is designed to satisfy. The increasing demand for post-luxury conceptual functional art, therefore, can be viewed as an observable economic symptom resulting from the spectacle's foundational philosophical and social bankruptcy, a crisis first mapped in from the aura to the simulacrum. This intellectual project culminates in the validation of post-luxury conceptual functional art, which functions as the codification framework. Post-luxury conceptual functional art consciously adopts the inherent values previously suppressed within Sholette's dark matter, autonomy, non-market exchange, and political utility, and transforms them into a coherent system of resistance against the neoliberal logic of bare art. The selection of the physical object, the artifact itself, as the primary medium for this political engagement is not arbitrary. Material culture scholarship confirms that objects are not merely passive reflections of social life, but active political technologies that both reflect and construct a culture's beliefs and values, implying a dynamic, wheel-moving relationship between people and things. If the spectacle mediates social relations through abstract images, then the physical object, one grounded in intensive, sensory and verifiable labor, becomes the necessary counter-medium. It serves as a material technology of political communication, indispensable for transforming abstract critical critique into a tangible form of economic resistance that can be witnessed and internalized by consumers. The reign of abstract appearance, Guy Debord's spectacle, the spectacle as totalitarian social relation. Guy Debord's analysis defines the spectacle not merely as a collection of media or visual imagery, though these are certainly its glaring superficial manifestations. Instead, the spectacle represents a far more profound totalitarian social phenomenon. It is the autocratic reign of the market economy, and a total social relation mediated by images. It functions as an overpowering force that colonizes and reshapes modern life, presenting itself as a fixed, undeniable, and universally necessary reality. The system shows how modern life has come to value appearances more than actual human experiences, leading to a deep sense of disconnection. This dramatic shift has inverted the hierarchy of lived experience, establishing a condition where all that once was directly lived has become mere representation. The spectacle systemically strengthens isolation, keeping individuals detached from their own lives and severing genuine connections with others. As a critique, Debord's work is a direct and radical development of Karl Marx's concept of commodity fetishism and alienation, as reprised by Georgy Lukács. Under the spectacle, the dynamics of power are reversed. Commodities rule the workers and consumers, transforming individuals into passive, contemplative subjects who merely gaze upon reified, fragmented images drawn from every aspect of life. The persistence of the spectacle stems, in part, from its inherent defense mechanism against critical opposition. Debord anticipated that his critique would bitterly contend with its interpreters. The spectacle's strategy involves affirming a priori models of commensurable social discourse that are fundamentally at odds with perspectives intended for its abolition. Consequently, any effective resistance, such as artisan activism, must operate outside the spectacle's established communicative framework. It necessitates proceeding with caution and meticulous precision, effectively demanding that the critique be delivered in a new way that transcends reliance on image or discourse. Artisan activism achieves this by communicating not through fluid images or verbal critique, but through the material friction of a physical, non-negotiable ethical investment. The abstraction and congealment of labor. The foundational process by which the spectacle achieves its domination is the systematic inversion of living value. Debord explains that the spectacle's basic practice involves incorporating all the fluid aspects of genuine human activity, only to possess them in a congealed form, thereby inverting authentic human values into purely abstract values. This is the familiar mechanism of the commodity fetish, albeit taken to an all-encompassing extreme. The abstraction begins through the radical division of labor, which structurally separates the worker from the very product of their effort. Under this advanced stage of capitalism, capital itself transcends its former role. It is no longer understood as a real relation, but as an abstraction and thus an image. While capital was once an invisible center directing the mode of production, its immense accumulation is now spread to the periphery, manifesting as tangible objects. The concentrated result of all social labor thus becomes visible. Yet this visibility functions only to subjugate all reality to appearance, which is now capital's primary product. A further sign of spectacular domination is the fundamental reordering of temporality. The reality of time, the authentic duration of lived experience and genuine labor, is systematically replaced by the advertisement of time, the promise of endless consumption and leisure. The underlying mechanism enabling this process is the critical distinction between concrete labor, specific effort, and abstract labor, universal, exchangeable expenditure of effort. The shift from concrete labor allows abstract laws to dominate individuals, leaving isolated, independent concrete laborers at the mercy of abstract social forces. This means that the more abstract the value, the less weight is given to the concrete labor time required to create it. This structural abstraction is directly responsible for the proliferation of precarious existence. The move from personalized, concrete labor to fungible, abstract labor creates the perfect conditions for precarious work, fragmented, contingent, and non-standard jobs that are easily dominated and, crucially, easily rendered invisible to institutional acknowledgement. This creation of dispersed and unprotected labor forms the necessary economic and social foundation for Gregory Sholette's subsequent analysis of unacknowledged creative production, establishing the missing mass as the very human content abstracted by the spectacle. The weight we don't see, Gregory Sholette's missing mass, the dark matter of the creative economy. If Debord identified the spectacular mechanism of abstracting human value, Gregory Sholette pinpoints the specific population whose labor is consumed and obscured by this abstraction. Sholette's seminal thesis centers on the artistic dark matter, or missing mass, the vast, unacknowledged surplus of creative labor that structurally underpins the art world and the luxury economy. Like its astrophysical counterpart, this mass is predicted and necessary for the motions of the visible artistic universe, yet remains invisible primarily to the critics, art historians, collectors, dealers, and curators who manage and interpret culture. This invisible archipelago encompasses all makeshift, amateur, informal, autonomous, self-organized and institutionally redundant practices. It includes a shadow archive of redundant, surplus practitioners, ideas, projects, etc., whose efforts, though often in plain sight, go unrecognized. The analysis emphasizes that there is often no discernible material difference between the earnest amateur and the professional artist, made invisible by her failure within the art market. Suggesting institutional structure, not inherent quality, dictates visibility. This missing mass constitutes the majority of artistic activity in post-industrial society. The economic consequences of this pervasive invisibility are critical. Workers within this mass experience job insecurity, contingent and non-standard work, and the degradation of labor through fragmentation. As jobs become fragmented, their parts become dispersed and difficult to observe, contributing directly to the invisibility of the labor itself. This condition means that the unacknowledged creative contributions, often disproportionately shouldered by women globally, function as an immense, silent subsidy that props up formal organizations and economic systems without recognition or structural relief. The high art world's profound dependency is demonstrated by contemplating the severe, destabilizing impact that would ensue if these hidden producers were to cease or pause their activity. The missing mass is, therefore, the essential, often uncompensated, raw material upon which spectacular appropriation and abstract value accumulation are founded. The post-luxury conceptual functional art link, brightening the dark matter. The structural dependency of the established luxury market on this missing mass leads to a systemic process of appropriation. The luxury industry actively mines dark matter for stylistic renewal, a process evidenced by the appropriation of subcultures or the commodification of protest aesthetics. This mining results in a hollowed-out meaning, leading to a state of exhaustion in traditional luxury systems. This process reinforces the invisibility of the source labor, ensuring the automatic subject of speculative capital continues to valorize itself indefinitely, detached from the friction of ethical constraints or material labor. Post-luxury conceptual functional art, post-luxury conceptual functional art framework is fundamentally conceived as the brightening of this artistic dark matter. It is a conscious, structured codification of the inherent, suppressed values of the periphery: autonomy, non-market exchange, and political utility. The cultural shift documented by post-luxury conceptual functional art is understood as the moment when these previously suppressed values become visible, coherent, and codified into a new, resistant system of worth. The intellectual project of post-luxury conceptual functional art aims to turn the process of spectacular abstraction inside out, explicitly revealing the invisible labor that previously undergirded the visible spectacle. However, the political utility of this brightening must be precisely directed. Sholette critically nuances this concept, cautioning that the emergence of the missing mass into visibility is not inherently progressive. It can manifest as reactionary or far-right formations. This observation underscores the critical necessity for the deliberate, explicit political coding inherent in artisan activism. Given that the volume of uncompensated creative work functions as a hidden subsidy, artisan activism is the necessary attempt to reclaim this subsidized value. By demanding a foundational emphasis on explicit ethical commitment, the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework provides the required ideological filter, ensuring that the rising force of dark matter is anchored in verifiable social critique, rather than mere market antagonism. Détournement by hand, the political economy of the artisan material culture as political counter-technology. The path to transforming dark matter into moral capital requires the tactical deployment of détournement, a key situationist concept meaning the deflection, diversion, or misappropriation of existing elements toward a new, critical purpose. In the context of material culture, artisan activism utilizes the aesthetic and economic forms of the luxury object, but fundamentally diverts their intended function, from consumption sign value to political sign value. This critical act inflates the object's meaning, thereby undermining the aura of honest broker of appearances that characterizes bourgeois culture and the spectacle. The intensive, sensory, and intellectual experience of craft labor provides the necessary material friction for this physical détournement. Material culture is confirmed as an active political technology, reflecting and constructing cultural values. The artisan physically grounds the object's value in physical investment, thereby linking the sheer materiality of the object to a non-negotiable moral authority. This transformation substitutes generalized, abstract labor, which exists only through its concrete manifestations, with personalized, self-directed labor that is explicitly framed as an act of protest. By intentionally reinserting the specific, non-average, concrete labor into the value equation and tying it to an ethical commitment, the artisan deliberately disrupts the market's mechanisms. Capitalism attempts to regulate market prices based on socially necessary abstract labor time, seeking a consensus that affirms the social division of labor a posteriori. By declaring the labor time explicit and ethical, a protest, the artisan deliberately injects antagonism, creating a disruption in the expected coincidence between individual supply and demand. The material object thus functions as a non-exchangeable marker of singular human commitment, permanently embedding the political idea within the artifact. From conservative past to antagonistic present, the application of the artisan figure as a revolutionary agent must confront the historical Marxist tendency to classify the artisan as politically reactionary. Historically, the artisan was viewed as part of the petty bourgeoisie, who owned their means of production and stood in the way of full capitalist development. However, artisan activism fundamentally challenges this classification by transforming the artisan's relative autonomy into an active political veto. By prioritizing the political idea over immediate commercial viability, the artist intentionally creates an antagonism to the speculative market structure itself. This non-negotiable intent to protest is established as the critical determinant of the object's value. The modern activist artisan is no longer merely seeking to survive pre-capitalism. They are actively deploying post-capitalist critique, using the friction of material effort. The critical commitment acts as a high barrier to speculative entry. Capital is fundamentally inhibited from monetizing resistance that is materially secured by a stated ethical purpose. Given the capacity of the system to absorb and monetize dissent, swiftly converting even radical artistic positions into market assets, the artisan must ensure their protest is non-ambiguous. The labor itself is not enough. The artist must provide an explicit, verifiable declaration, a philosophical provenance that formalizes the antagonism. This declaration is the critical requirement that transforms potential resistance into codified moral capital, preventing the work from being recuperated as merely a flattering self-image of finance. The strategic refusal to submit to abstract market metrics, manifested as material friction, represents the ultimate form of anti-speculative resistance. Moral capital. The new currency of resistance, the ethical transfer and inalienable worth moral capital emerges as the direct result of the political détournement enacted by artisan activism. It is defined as the inalienable ethical weight transferred from the artisan's critical commitment and embodied within the material components of the object. This process necessitates a profound commitment to the social critique embedded within the production process. Moral capital's primary function is to counter the spectacle's reification by securing the object's worth to a genuine, non-transferable human investment. The value cannot be abstracted into a mere money form because its magnitude is contingent upon an ideological commitment that fundamentally cannot be bought or sold without negating the object's entire purpose. This framework introduces a new morality into the economic domain, challenging the narrow, quantitative definition of productiveness and providing an ethical measure where markets otherwise only provide the law of contract. This project relies on making the invisible labor of the missing mass radically visible. However, this visibility must be non-recuperable. Moral capital achieves this through explicit declaration. This permanent political sign value outweighs any temporary financial sign value, turning the object's visual presence from a spectacular image into an authoritative political statement. This mechanism introduces a unique constraint on ownership. Moral capital is effectively an ethical liability. For a collector, purchasing the object means adopting its political commitment as part of its provenance. This ethical burden inherently reduces the pool of willing speculators who seek only pure financial leverage, thereby securing the object's lasting value through its ideological weight and the need for cultural custodianship. The remainder of this study continues at objectsofaffectioncollection.com. This has been a study from the Objects of Affection Collection, a critical art research institution operating under the framework of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Read the full research at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.